Let's cross live now to the author of Food Bank Britain, and that's Ray Woolford. Nice to have you on, Ray. Some appalling findings, though, in this report. What shocks you the most?
What I found was most shocking. I really need to read you because it's his words. He says, "In my meetings with government, it was clear to me that the impact of Brexit on people in poverty is an afterthought to be dealt with through manipulation of physical policy after the event, if at all." And then he quickly says, "We are witnessing the gradual disappearance of the post-war welfare state behind a web page." And I think that's really scary because amongst all the figures, what people don't realise is that 56 million people exist in Britain today. That's the government figures. Of those, 12 million, that's 1 in 5 by the government's own figures, so it's probably far greater than that, is actually in poverty in Britain in 2018. And that should shock us all because we pay for it through taxation, our NHS. Poverty leads to health issues. Even if you are sitting at home and you're not impacted by poverty because you have a good job, you have a good income, you have your own home, the reality is your taxation is paying for those people dying in the doorways in your neighbourhood. Your tax is paying for the extra costs of the NHS because of poor health inflicted through poverty. So poverty is an issue we all need to be addressing, and all political parties are responsible. Why is it with 1 in 5 people in poverty in the UK, not one political party has a minister dedicated to eradicate poverty? And that in itself is a scandal, that poverty is not being addressed, it's not being seen as having any value, and the reality is too many people are making money out of poverty.
Do you think that the number of people who are very poor is masked somewhat to the extent that so many people just live in debt? So many people, up to their eyeballs in borrowed money. Does that mask the fact that actually they have very little?
It is. I mean, also the thing you've got to take into account that Ofcom did a report just recently that 140,000 households a year now are not even connected to the national grid. That means 140,000 households are too poor to even have gas or electricity. We're no longer in the quagmire of being a choice between eating and heating. We're actually in a situation where there's people in Britain today who are living in housing where they have newspapers as curtains. There isn't a toy for their child to play. There isn't a TV. There isn't a radio. There isn't a pair of shoes, because everything they have, they've sold on eBay in order to make money to buy that week's pot noodle or that week's meal on a Sunday. And most people in poverty are so shamed by the very existence of being within poverty that they won't even tell their own family members that they've got no food in the cupboard that day.
I think the divide between rich and poor is put into a very clear light by one element I saw in the report. 40% of children will live in poverty by 2022 if these policies continue. What needs to be changed? How do we stop the children beginning life without a chance?
Well, I think that the really key thing about the report, and we've got to go back slightly, this is not the first major report. Only 2 weeks ago, the public inquiry into the NHS blood contamination scandal, a criminal barrister for Carol Ann Grayson, who's one of the victims in this case and one of the key campaigners, the criminal barrister accused our government of grievous bodily harm, the same allegation the United Nations made against our government today, and also went further and said that our government is guilty of murder of its own people. Why isn't it this story is not #1 on the BBC, #1 on ITV? Poverty, 1 in 5, that's 20% of the population are in poverty. 6.9% of those people, of those households, are people with disability. The poorest, the most vulnerable, people who don't choose, and you rightly argue the case for 4 million children. Children aren't responsible for the actions that may or may not have occurred by their parents. We all have responsibility, and it's shameful that we are allowing empty buildings to rot in our streets while people die in their doorways, why disabled people are now housebound because they have no money to get out the house, and why in 2018 people are literally starving to death, not just in India, not just in Yemen, not just in Kashmir, but also here in London, one of the richest capitals on the planet. That is a scandal, an indictment of this government in which the only growth we have seen is poverty, food bank use, misery, drug addiction and gang violence. They're all linked to poverty. They all need to be addressed, and every government must appoint a minister to address poverty and overlook it and see how it impacts on education, on health, on people's well-being, because we're all paying for it and it needs to be addressed now.
Ray, great to have you on. Oh, so glad that we got the chance to give you an opportunity to voice those very important opinions. Author of Food Bank Britain, Ray Walford, my guest.